We're joined by Kurt Bardella, the Democratic strategist, LA Times contributor, and May Melman as well is with us, Vice President, Restoring Integrity and Trust in Elections, and a former Trump White House Associate Counsel and Republican strategist. So, as always, welcome to you both. Kurt, you go first on this because we talked about Hunter Biden earlier in the hour, and as I just said, you're not equating the two when you talk about Donald Trump and Hunter Biden. One's the president's son, and the other's a former president who's running to be president again. That said, what are the political ramifications, do you think, for President Biden's reelection of Hunter Biden finding himself in all this, potential hot water legally? There must be some political fallout. Do you think there is?
I don't think it's as much as people might think at first glance, in part because unlike Donald Trump, Joe Biden's not going to be taking the stand routinely. He's not going to be spending most of his time in courtrooms. Donald Trump's fighting 91 indictments. Joe Biden is fighting a total of 0. I think on top of it, the show of impeachment that House Republicans look like they're about to launch, I think that will backfire on them. And in a way, the politicization that we're seeing from Republicans in Congress kind of taints really the political impact that could happen on the Hunter Biden side. And remember, Republicans love saying, and Trump loves saying, this is a witch hunt. These things against him are targeted. They're driven by his political enemies. Well, you can't really say the Justice Department is tainted and against you if that same Justice Department is going after the president's son.
Right. All right. May, you can pick up on that point, obviously, and talk about Hunter Biden. But I want to introduce the former president's legal issues as a timing question, because I was having this conversation as part of our debate coverage in Alabama with Mick Mulvaney. A lot of people say, and of course, was a former chief of staff in the Trump White House. A lot of people say that, if President Trump ends up being indicted, would you still support him? That kind of thing has been asked in a lot of polls. Sorry, convicted. Obviously, he's been indicted already. But if he's convicted of a crime, the issue with that, as Mick pointed out, is that we probably won't know any of this before the primary process, runs its course. But it then could become a really big general election issue. So how does that kind of hover over the Republican Party? They could very well have a nominee already picked, and then he's convicted of a crime or multiple crimes. What happens?
Yeah, I think that's already baked in. I know people say that if Trump is convicted, they're not going to vote for him. They're going to, all of a sudden enjoy Biden's policies.
Well, how would it be baked in? Sorry to interrupt, but how would it be baked in if he was convicted and then, a sentencing is coming up and all,
If people are currently saying that they support Trump, my belief is that they will support him even
no matter
though there's
what.
Like the DC court, the judge is not a Trump fan, obviously. The classified documents, I think if you're convicted there, people are going to say, well, Hillary did the same thing. And you had Jim Comey say, but I'm not going to prosecute. In New York, you've got, a biased judge. And then I guess the Stormy Daniels thing is just totally ridiculous. And then in Fulton County, you have a Fulton County jury. So pick your case. There's a reason to believe that there's a conviction coming, and there's a reason to discount it. So when I say it's baked in, what I mean is people's support for Trump, I think, understands that a conviction is possible, and that a conviction doesn't mean the same thing that you think it means because it's Donald Trump.
But there would be some practical impact, or maybe not. Kurt, what do you think? You're shaking your head there on a presidential race if the leading candidate is a convicted felon. Now, are we really at a point where we can say, as May says, that something like that is baked in, a convicted felon being inaugurated as president?
I don't think that. I think May is right that the diehard Trump supporters, they're going to be with Trump no matter what, sure. But I think that the political impact of a conviction, I think the place to watch then is those swing voters, those independent voters, those Liz Cheney Republicans, if you will, those who swayed towards Democrats over the last couple of years in places like Georgia and Pennsylvania, the ones who have come out and voted for the abortion initiatives in more conservative areas, most recently, like we've seen in the recent elections, like in Virginia. That those people will be turned off of a Republican.
That brings up a larger issue. I was just reading. I wanted to bring this up with you anyway, Kurt. Politico has this huge piece today. It's a long magazine article, but it brings up the question that you're raising in the article. It's a basic question: where are all the anti-Trump Republicans? That was the headline. Kurt, you used to be a Republican, right? You worked for Republicans professionally, then you went to the other side. And the basic premise is not necessarily on the voters, but on the professional side, that there were all these people, all these anti-Trumpers, never-Trumpers. We don't hear hear from them as much anymore. They're kind of quiet. So that's kind of to the point you're getting at, but you think they're still out there. Obviously, Liz Cheney's an exception, but a lot of Republicans in the party are not necessarily listening there.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of Republicans and former Republicans like myself who they may not be vocal. They may be afraid to go out there and publicly say the things that I say routinely day in and day out.
Right.
But when it comes to voting at the ballot box in a private, booth, I think they're not going to be voting for Donald Trump under any scenario.
And I want to get one last point, and then we'll let you guys go. And that we mentioned just briefly earlier, the debates. We had our debate, NewsNation debate sanctioned by the RNC, the fourth debate of the cycle there on Wednesday night in Alabama. And there was this big back and forth, May, about whether there would be more debates. Now, there were going to be on other networks these kind of unsanctioned debates. The RNC just put a statement out about it that essentially said the candidates, it's a long statement on the screen, but the bottom line here after you get through it all is that the candidates are free to choose the forum that they want to choose. So the RNC might not love it. They don't have any more debates in their schedule. But if a network wants to schedule debates in Iowa or New Hampshire, that's okay. That can happen. They're not going to hold anybody back. What do you think of that? Will that affect the race, May?
No, I don't. The debates for the people who watch them, I think, have gotten more and more useful as the field has winnowed. I think the last debate, having 4 people, you kind of did see where everyone is. And if Donald Trump is not going to show up, I don't really know if the voters are going to gain a whole heck of a lot by having more of them. What are you going to narrow it to 3, narrow it to 2? But I know the difference between Nikki Haley and Ron DeSantis. Yeah. So I sort of, the RNC, I think, could have done a better job, frankly, of winnowing it earlier and having maybe baiting Donald Trump to join. But they failed to do that.
I mean, it's hard. It's actually it's consolidated a lot quicker than we have in past cycles. We forget how many were up on the stage, but this is unique with the Trump factor. Kurt and May, good to see you both.